Good evening. I'm Ellen Herman, the faculty co-director of the Wayne Morse Center for Law and Politics here at U of O. On behalf of all of my colleagues at the center, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you and say how glad we are that you are here. I hope you had a chance to take a look at Mimi Noliedo's beautiful photography exhibit outside. It's titled Our Stories, Immigrants of America. Her photographs are really works of art as well as social commentary. Is Mimi in here? Okay, Mimi, we're so honored to have you participating in this. A lot of you, all of you, I hope, were given very tiny little surveys as you came in the room with pencils. I hope you'll complete them because we are very interested in organizing future events that not only educate and inspire you, but that are convenient for you as well. There's a little incentive to complete the survey. If you complete it and you submit your email address, you'll be entered into a drawing for a prize. I'm told the prize will involve chocolate. Part of the mission of the Wayne Morse Center is to cross the border that separates the university from the many communities that surround us as often and as creatively as we possibly can. We encourage civic engagement and dialogue by bringing students, scholars, activists, policymakers, and community members together in forums just like this one to discuss issues affecting Oregon, our nation, and the world. And what issues could be more urgent right now than borders, migration, and belonging? That's the title of the theme that we are just beginning. We hope you will return for many more of our events on this theme during the next 2 years. We'll be pursuing it this year and during the next school year as well. I'll just mention one coming right up on Friday. We have organized an event that's called Locked Up and Shut Out, about the relationship between mass incarceration and mass deportation. It's from noon to 4 in room 184 of the law school. There's more information out in the lobby, so when you take a peek at Mimi's photographs, you can also get information about that. And sign up for our mailing lists if you aren't already on it, and you'll hear about these kinds of public events. So just a few obligatory thank yous. First and most importantly, I want to say thank you to the amazing Wayne Morse Center staff, my colleagues. If you're here, just raise your hands. Abby Stilley. How about if we clap for them all at once? Abby Stilley, Thea Croman, Sally Frizella, Rebecca Flynn, and Dan Titchener. Okay. It is really such a pleasure to work on this A-team every day. And I'd also like to thank our co-sponsors for this event. They include the Center for Latino, Latina, and Latin American Studies, the Department of Cinema Studies, the Division of Equity and Inclusion, the Department of Ethnic Studies, the Oregon Humanities Center, the School of Journalism and Communication, and the U of O Center for Student Involvement B series. Several of these organizations and units have tables outside if you want to know more about their very exciting activities as well. And I finally want to give a special shout out and thank you to members of the Wayne Morse Circle. These are wonderful individuals who make annual donations to the Wayne Morse Center, and small gifts are truly just as appreciated as large ones. And there are perks. When you join, you'll be invited to private receptions and other special events with invited visitors like Jose Antonio Vargas. So please consider joining our circle. Again, there is more information about doing that on the table right outside the door. And now, I'm delighted to introduce Jose Antonio Vargas. Jose is this year's occupant of the Wayne Morse Chair. He's going to speak for about 45 or 50 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. Most of you probably noticed the mics that are positioned right here in the front in both aisles for that purpose. Many of you already know a lot about him. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's won many awards, including a Public Service Award from the National Council of La Raza, the Salem Award from the Salem Award Foundation, which draws upon the lessons of the Salem witch trials of 1692, and the Freedom to Write Award from Penn Center, USA. Since 2011, when he wrote a piece for the New York Times Magazine titled "My Life as an Undocumented Immigrant," he has been a tireless activist devoted to sharing diverse stories, including his own, about who migrants and immigrants are. I certainly remember reading that story and passing it around to a lot of my friends. That's 6 years ago. He is the founder of Define American, a nonprofit organization that believes stories can transcend politics and shift the conversation about immigration, identity, and citizenship. He is a symbol of personal bravery, humanitarianism, and the possibility that national and international policies can be changed in ways that will elevate the enduring strength of human connection over everything that divides us. Please join me in welcoming Jose to Oregon, Eugene, and the university.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks.
Good luck.
You actually showed up. Let me take a picture of you. Can you put the lights on a little bit? Wait. Actually, wait. Let's do a selfie. And if there's any ICE or immigration agents here, can you wait until the lecture is over? I'm staying in a hotel right off Franklin Boulevard. I'll talk to you, but just let me give the lecture. You're looking at the most privileged undocumented immigrant in the United States of America. So while undocumented immigrants are getting detained and deported every day, I'm sure you heard of the ICE agents in plain clothes who entered a private home in Portland last week and handcuffed and arrested a man holding a paintbrush without a warrant, which is unconstitutional, while undocumented immigrants fear for their lives while they're driving up and down Highway 5, trying to get to work, drop the kids off to school, buy groceries, go to church, fearing for their lives because Oregon does not allow its undocumented residents to get a driver's license. While undocumented students at this university and other schools across the state worry not only about how they will pay for school, but worry about what would happen if this classmate or that professor or instructor finds out that they're undocumented, here I am, flying across the country, reminding people that immigration is way more complicated than the illegal in our minds and the US-Mexico border. So in a state still grappling with how to protect its undocumented residents, I don't know if you know this, an estimated 130,000 undocumented immigrants live in Oregon. I feel incredibly privileged to be the Wayne Morse Chair at the Wayne Morse Center for Law and Politics in conjunction with its Borders, Migration, and Belonging theme of inquiry. And we can't really talk about borders, migration, and belonging without talking about Native Americans and the fact that we are standing on Kalapuya land. Let me just say that. And before I go on, I must thank the staff at the Wayne Morse Center for welcoming me, particularly Ellen Herman. Ellen, can you stand up again, please? This woman has been incredible. For more than a year now, Ellen and I have been emailing, and she's been working with our team at Define American to take the fullest advantage of this opportunity. Often universities don't really know exactly what to do with me. They try to do something like this and then they chicken out. This is the first university that went all the way through. So thank you for that. And Define American took advantage of it to such an extent that there's actually a class here. There's actually a Define American course this semester. And there's a PhD student, a doctoral student, teaching a course called Define American, How Mainstream Entertainment Media Shapes Public Perceptions of Immigrants and Immigration. Students, about 20, I think some of the students are here, and instructor, Mariko Plesia. Is she here somewhere? Can everybody please? She's here. Please give her a round of applause. So, what is Define American? Define American is a nonprofit media and culture organization whose primary task is changing the culture in which we think and talk about immigrants in America today. Notice that I'm actually not separating undocumented from documented, the legal from the illegal. That's because undocumented immigrants live in families where the kids may be U.S. citizens, but the parents are not, right? And here are the questions that drive our work at Define American. How are immigrants being portrayed in news media, in articles, and in TV? Not just Fox News, but MSNBC, CNN, PBS. How are immigrants being portrayed in movies and television shows? Why is it that whenever you see someone who's Mexican, it's always about a gang-related narrative, right? Why is it that television writers, a very smart group of people, can't seem to know the difference between Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Ecuadorians? I don't know. How did we get to a point where being anti-immigrant is not only culturally acceptable, being anti-immigrant can actually win you the White House? How did we get there? At a time of the essential Black Lives Matter movement, at a time when we must never forget about Native American and indigenous peoples, how do we talk about immigrants and insist on telling America's full story? Which is something I argue we've never fully done. Now, I'm a journalist, so I love numbers. Let me explain this. So the 800,000 there, that's the 800,000 young people who qualify for DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. You've been hearing a lot about this in the past few weeks. 800,000 people. Those 800,000 people, I didn't qualify for DACA. I missed the deadline by 4 months. Those 800,000 people live within the 11 million total undocumented population. And that 11 million undocumented population is part of the total 43 million immigrant population in America today. There are 43 million immigrants in America today, documented and undocumented, which constitutes 15% of the total population. Why is that percentage important? That's exactly the same percentage of immigrants in America 100 years ago at the height of the Ellis Island, right? Now, 88%. The Pew Research Center came up with a report last year that predicts that the 43 million immigrant population, mostly Latinos and Asians, will constitute 88% of the total U.S. population growth in the next 50 years. In other words, a country that can't seem to have a conversation about black and white issues without having a panic attack is now going to have to deal with, and is dealing with, a much more complex demographic reality. And for us, media is an important way of telling the story because, especially in this age of technology, there's really a me in media, right? I mean, that's what this is about. That's what it's about, that everybody has their own news feeds. I remember when I profiled Mark Zuckerberg for The New Yorker 7 years ago, he said to me, "Oh, you know, your news feed is going to be the newspaper of your life." I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He was right. There's a me in media, and the media, individual and collective, shapes culture, and the culture defines whom we consider to be and what we consider to be American. Now, Ellen first contacted me about this chairmanship May 2016. Then, of course, the election happened, and my life changed. I actually have to say, I'm going to be really honest about this. I went through a 3-week process where I went from, okay, that's it, I'm leaving. I thought hard enough about self-deprecation. that we were actually going to contact the Canadian Prime Minister's office to try to figure out how to do it, because deporting me back to the Philippines didn't seem like a possibility, given that President Duterte can just be as bad as President Trump. Between the two guys, I'm kind of screwed. So we figured, hey, Canada, right? Why not? I love Anne of Green Gables, you know, growing up. And then as I was looking on Craigslist for apartments in Toronto, which actually were relatively affordable, as I was looking at the University of Toronto that has a migration studies department, as I was actually looking at how can I work with the Toronto Film Festival, the largest film festival in the world, I was doing all the research, and then an email landed in my inbox the morning, 2 weeks before my birthday, from Nancy Pelosi's office. Nancy Pelosi used to be my representative when I was living in San Francisco. I've interviewed her a few times. The email said, hey, do you want to come to the joint session of Congress while President Trump gives his first address? It was a reminder that I wasn't done yet. I'm not done yet. So I told my lawyers, I have a lot, as you can imagine. I told him, hey, Nancy Pelosi just invited me to be one of her guests for the State of the Union, the joint session of Congress. And my lawyers, of course, said, absolutely not, you are not going. I thought we were going to Canada. And then I kept thinking about the fact that, you know, I cannot let a presidency of any party scare me from my own country. So in addition to deciding to go and having a contingency plan just in case they arrested me at the Capitol building, of course, I did this. I wrote an essay for the Washington Post that was published literally as I was walking into the Capitol building. And the headline, by the way, that's called a clickbait headline. I didn't write that headline. The Washington Post did that. Sorry, my colleagues at the Washington Post. The other headline, the sub-headline was mine. I showed up because that's what we do. I show up because undocumented immigrants show up every day. Isn't it incredible to know that ICE can just come to a house and issue and arrest us without a warrant, knowing that you're driving up Highway 99 and somebody could just pull you over, that you're going to take care of someone's kid, that you're going to work? Isn't it incredible that aside from all that fear and all that anxiety, that people wake up every day and go to work? You know, there's a lot of ways that I define American, but I think one way that we can actually absolutely agree on is American is resilience. I am in awe of the resilience of my fellow undocumented Americans in this country. I am in complete awe of it. So I write this essay, and the first headline, the first sentence is, "This is my country too." And I wrote that when our bodies are seen as mere labor, when our presence is broadly criminalized, our very existence is an act of resistance. To be undocumented in this country means your life is dependent on laws created by powerful people that most people don't even know or bother to understand. As I travel across this country, engaging people of all backgrounds, at Define America, and we've done more than 900 events in 48 states, and engage as many Tea Party, Republican, Trump voters as we possibly can, we have realized that most Americans really do not know the basic facts of this issue. I don't know if you know this, but the typical white American lives in a town that is more than 3/4 white. And the average white person's group of friends is more than 90% white. To a large degree, what white Americans and what all Americans of all backgrounds, what they know about us is from what they watch on television and what they read in the news. Tragically, and I say this at this university, which has an esteemed journalism department, tragically, my own colleagues in journalism don't know what these basic facts are. This is a video that we actually published at Define American last year at the height of the primary campaign.
No topic perhaps has been more combustible in this campaign than the issue of immigration.
You know, John Adams famously said, facts are stubborn things. The facts are very, very simple.
You say that the Mexican government is sending criminals, rapists, drug dealers across the border.
We must secure our border.
We will secure the border.
And you have to defend the border.
The border is a disaster. It's like a piece of Swiss cheese.
We need to tap them on the shoulder and say, you have overstayed your welcome. You are taking advantage of the American people. It's time for you to go.
We can end welfare for those here illegally.
Turn off the spigot that dispenses all the goodies.
On your immigration policies, you are really just playing to people's fantasies, which is a tactic you praised in your book, The Art of the Deal.
I'm not playing to anybody's fantasy.
Journalism is my church and reporting is my religion. I am journalism, as a journalist, that's been my identity since I was a teenager. And it angers me, frustrates me, and pains me how incredibly irresponsible the news media has been in this time of crisis in this country. Let's just take one statistic. Did you know that undocumented workers are paid $100 billion into the Social Security Fund? And the source of that information is the Social Security Administration itself. I have gotten letters, actually. Apparently, I've personally contributed $140,000 into the Social Security Fund using a fake Social Security number, but the Social Security people didn't seem to know and care, so they keep collecting the money. I called them and I said, hey, do I get any of that back? No, you don't. When was the last time you saw that figure of $100 billion anywhere? Saw it in the New York Times? The liberal New York Times? The Washington Post? How about the Oregonian? But what's the narrative? They're criminals. They're taking, right? They're crowding your hospitals and your schools. Right now, I'm an undocumented entrepreneur, something I never thought would ever happen. But the only way for me to work is for me to own a business. Undocumented immigrants can't be employed, although we know that you employ us, but we can start our own businesses and employ people. So I employ 14 full-time staffers at Define American and apparently provide very good healthcare benefits and insurance. Recently, the woman we just hired for our entertainment division said, hey, I've never had health insurance before. She's 40 years old, so thank you for the health insurance for the job. And I told her that I actually have to get my own health insurance because I can't get insurance from the very company that I started because I'm undocumented. So I have to buy my own private one. I have personally paid so much taxes, I should be a Republican. But you know what? I'm more than happy to pay the taxes. I'm a product of public schools. The libraries were my original Google, right? I believe that we should have roads, and I believe that we provide people with safety nets to people who need it. Because that's what citizenship is, knowing that the world does not revolve around you, right? So I'm all for that, but hey, can we at least know what the facts are? Can we at least talk about people like they're not insects off our backs? Now, the one thing that was not clear from that video is the reality that to be undocumented means that your life is dependent on pieces of papers, all the while trying to remember that your life is more than pieces of papers. So this is the green card that my grandparents gave me when I got to this country. I didn't know. I was 12, came here from the Philippines. I didn't know that it was fake until I went to the DMV to get a driver's license. And the woman said, this is fake. Don't come back here again. The first thing I thought in my head was I'm not Mexican. Because when I was growing up in California, whenever anybody said anything about illegal, it meant Mexican. And I was thinking, maybe the woman is confused because my name is Jose Antonio Vargas. It's called Spanish colonialism. So I remind her, I'm not Mexican. And she said, I don't care what you are. This is fake. Right? I thought I was the only non-Mexican illegal alien in Mountain View, California when I was growing up. Now, the first thing I thought of when I found out that that was illegal was I have to do everything I can to pass so that you don't think I'm illegal. So for me, that meant I have to figure out how to get rid of my Filipino accent. I don't know if anybody here is Filipino, but sometimes our accent is, there's no H sound in Tagalog, so we talk like this, like that. So get rid of that accent. And And I figured, wait a second, if I can't be here because I don't have the right papers, what if my name is on the paper? So that's why I became a journalist. Because when you're a journalist, you get this thing called a byline. So it says, by Jose Antonio Vargas, right? So how can they say I don't exist if my name is on the paper? Doesn't that mean I exist? And I thought, at that point, I made a list of everything I thought I needed to do to be a really good journalist, whatever that means. And that means you work for the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, or the New York Times. You become a political reporter because people think that's a good thing. You win a prize, a Pulitzer, I don't know how you even pronounce it. You do all of these things, and then you're considered a good journalist. And you get published in this thing called The New Yorker, which has really long words and costs $5 that has no photos. It's all drawings. I don't know what that's about, right? So you do all of those things, and then you become successful. And when I got offered an internship at the Washington Post in 2003, Cheryl Butler, the recruiter, was like, hey, we're really happy to have you here. 900 people applied, 19 get it. You're more than 19 people. Please show up with your driver's license on the first day of the internship. No license. I was 22. I really wanted the internship. And so, because I love the library, I spent one full day at the Mountain View Public Library, which has a free computer room, and researched every state's requirements to get a driver's license. Every single state. And figured out that Oregon and Tennessee had the most lenient requirements. That all I needed to do was to show an ID from my college, a pay stub from where I was working, and mail that has been sent to a house or a place in Oregon. I pulled down the map. Tennessee was all the way over there. Oregon was up there. I went to Oregon. Isn't that your nightmare? Your driver's license blown up? So I'm just really being honest here. This is more than a driver's license. It's a lifeline. There would not be a journalism career for me at the Washington Post or the New Yorker without this driver's license. It was the only piece of government ID I ever had. I dropped it once at a club. I panicked and freaked out. Thankfully, we found it. I don't know if you can see that. It was issued on June 4, 2003. It expires on February 3rd, 2011, which is the precise date of my 30th birthday. I figured I had 8 years to do everything I can to be successful and to earn the citizenship that I'm waiting for this country to somehow deem me worthy. 8 years. I figured I can do a lot in 8 years. I can cover the presidential campaign in 2008. I can profile Mark Zuckerberg for The New Yorker. I can make a documentary that could premiere at Showtime. I can do all of that, and then it expires. And then what? So then I had a choice. As any reporter would do, I started reporting on just how bad the situation was. Every immigration lawyer told me that this is kind of bad. One lawyer at Stanford actually said to me, you weren't supposed to make it that far. Why did you just keep lying on the forms? One lawyer said to me, the very fact that you lied about it being a U.S. citizen is precisely the reason why you will never become a U.S. citizen. When she said that, I thought, okay, that's it. Maybe I should leave. And then I started thinking, wait a second, this is where I'm from. I am who I am because of this country, because of the investment of all the teachers, all the mentors, anybody and everybody who's ever believed that I was more than just this piece of paper that I can't seem to get. So against the advice of 27 lawyers, isn't that the most horrible photo you've ever seen? So against the advice of the 27 lawyers, I admitted to everything. How I got the driver's license from the state of Oregon, how I lied in all the employment forms, including the Pulitzer forms, whenever I had to fill them out, how I lied in all the pay stubs, all of it. I did that as a journalist. As a journalist, our job is to tell the truth, even though it's really uncomfortable because it's personal. I did it even against the advice of lawyers who said, the moment you do this, there's nothing we can do to help you. You can't marry your way into citizenship. You can't get an O visa, an extraordinary ability visa. The only thing you have to do is get a pardon from a president or immigration reform to pass. That's it. But I did it, and then I waited. I figured, somebody from the government will contact me. Bill O'Reilly called, Stephen Colbert called. I went to all the shows. I did NPR. I did everything you possibly could do, and then nothing happened. Now, mind you, at that time, President Obama was deporting 400,000 immigrants a year. President Obama deported about 3 million immigrants in 8 years. I know President Obama. I interviewed him when I was at the Washington Post. But no one wanted to say anything. I got arrested in Texas. Somebody got me out from the detention center, and the White House said no comment. So I wrote this story, and then I waited, and nothing happened. I called the editor of Time magazine, and I said, hey, I want to write a story about why they haven't deported me. I'm a journalist. This is what we do, right? So the editor of Time magazine at the time was like, are you serious? I'm like, yes. So I actually called the Department of Homeland Security myself. Hi, I'm Jose Antonio Vargas. I haven't heard from you. The woman on the line was like, I know who you are. Why are you calling me? Well, I'm writing a story for Time magazine. It's going to be a cover story, so I have some questions. Are you going to deport me? Why? Why not? She put me on hold. She got back on the line, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, what are you doing? And I said, yo, I'm on deadline. It's the cover for Time. I need a comment. She said, no comment. You know, as I thought about it, I started thinking it's a metaphor for what most Americans think of us. So long as someone is babysitting your kids and mowing your lawns and serving you drinks, so long as someone is doing the harvesting that you need so you can have the apples and the tomatoes and the oranges that you need, so long as you have the cheap labor that you could never do without, you're fine, right? It's not your problem. It's politics. No comment. So I wrote the story, and then Time was like, hey, we'll put you on the cover. And I'm like, no, I've already done that. It was horrible. Let's do something different. So we did this. And to this day, that was probably like the proudest moment in my journalism career, was choreographing this cover shoot that had 32 undocumented young people from 15 different countries. An undocumented woman from Nigeria who's a chemistry major, an undocumented German from Ohio, an undocumented man from Israel, an undocumented Korean. 1 out of 7 Koreans in this country is here illegally. 1 out of 7. So this represents the diversity of the issue, right? For the first time ever, undocumented people were on the cover of a magazine, right? But guess what happens in the news cycle? It just keeps moving and moving and moving, right? So this happened, and I remember when this happened, all I could think about was Ellen. So the first time I came out was in 1998, a few months after the Ellen cover story on Time, because I figured it was too hard to be in the closet about being undocumented and being gay, so I figured I should come out of one of the closets. And because of Ellen on the cover of Time, made me feel easier to see this smiling woman on this cover to come out of the gay one, right? And guess what? What Ellen DeGeneres started with this cover is the cultural shift in how LGBT people were portrayed in this country in mainstream popular culture. 2 years after this was the season premiere of Will and Grace, which became the #1 show on television for 8 years. And you know what was great about Will and Grace is that for every Will, there's a Grace. Meaning for every gay person, there's the straight classmate, best friend, relatives, co-workers, neighbors, right, who advocate for the LGBTQ friend. So for us at Define American, this was the shift, and that we cannot change the politics of an issue unless we change the culture in which people talk about an issue. That was the case for LGBTQ rights, and that will prove to be the case with immigrant rights. The truth is, while immigration is a moral crisis for the 11 million undocumented immigrants and the millions more who make up our friends and families, immigrant rights is largely viewed as a political partisan issue by the media and the public that consumes all kinds of media. That's why to us at Define American, storytelling is a correction. Storytelling is an intervention. Storytelling is liberation. Storytelling to us is a coming out process that lets people in. The reality is we have been so busy calling people names and clinging on to myths and lies, swimming in our own ignorance and indifference, that we're not even asking the hard questions. Hard questions like, why do people move? Is there anything more natural than movement? And what does U.S. foreign policy and trade agreements have to do with migration patterns? In other words, what role does the United States play economically, politically, in this chain of migration? Like, what did NAFTA do to Mexico? When we fund a drug war, what happens in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala? When they had those civil wars, which side did we go with? The wrong side. Well, so I'm Filipino. There's about 4 million of us in this country. We're the third largest immigrant group. It's Mexicans, Chinese, and then Filipinos. We're the Italians of Asia. We have huge families. I'm sure you know Filipino, you know. We love to laugh and we love food, right? So I'm in this event in North Carolina with a lot of Tea Party members. It was pretty late at night. And towards the end of the event, this man got up and said, "Why are there so many of you here?" When I said I'm Filipino. And, you know, all I could say to him, it was pretty late at night, all I could say was, you know, "Sir, we are here because you were there." The Spanish-American War? Remember when the Philippines then became a protectorate of the United States like Puerto Rico? I mean, do you know your own history? The question now is, if the Western world, like the United States and Europe, if they can grow their economies and develop their industries through colonization and imperialism, then why can't we move? Right? Why is it that when white people move, it's manifest destiny? It's white man's burden, the pioneer, right? Why is it that when people of color move, is it legal? Is it a crime? Now, I believe that every country has a right to define and defend its borders. I absolutely believe that. We must believe that. But I think we ought to examine why it is that goods and commodities travel more easily than people. I find it really, really interesting that this iPhone can be manufactured in China, delivered in Cupertino, the headquarters of Apple, and end up in New York where I buy it. How can this iPhone go to more places than I can? I've been in this country since I was 12. I don't want to use the word stuck, but I'm kind of stuck here. I haven't seen my mom for 25 years. She can't come here on a tourist visa because she's not a college graduate and she doesn't own property, right? If she were a French woman, she could buy a plane ticket and go see Hamilton if she can get a ticket. Maybe she could. And overstay her visa, right? So my mom, like any Filipino or anyone from India or Guatemala or Nigeria, has to wait decades to be in line to come. So I think 12 more years to wait, right? Now, and since we're talking about legality, I think we have to remind ourselves that legality is never almost always about justice, but a construct of power. That there are many, many instances in this country in which something was deemed legally legal, yet morally illegal, right? Violently taking indigenous land, lynching, segregation, all of these atrocities were legal. Barring women were legal. Barring women from the right to vote was the law of the land. Jim Crow was the law of the land. There was a Chinese Exclusion Act that actually barred Chinese laborers from coming to this country. There were laws barring Germans, Italians, and other Europeans to come to this country. I don't know if you know this, but the first ever law that we had, the Naturalization Act of 1790, was the first time we tried to define who could be a citizen. The only people that could be a citizen were a free white person of good moral character. I don't know if you know this, but Native Americans did not become citizens of the United States until 1924, when the Indian Citizenship Act was passed. My friend Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, said to me that the Black Lives Matter movement is actually about citizenship. Not citizenship like papers, but citizenship as dignity. When I got here last week, my first day on campus, I picked up the Daily Emerald, which is a good paper, I have to say. I picked it up and I read the story and ended up tweeting it. The headline was, "Why aren't there more black people in Oregon?" So I tweeted that, and you gotta love Twitter. So someone who follows me says, "Truth, it was illegal for us to be here, move here." Sorry for the F-bomb, but there it is. And I thought I knew enough about history. I had no idea what she was talking about. So I looked it up, of course, and then got back to her on Twitter. At that point, to which she wrote, "Furthermore," I have to read this out loud. "Furthermore, I consider my mere presence in a state that perpetually reminds me of my singularity of protests against racism and white supremacy." All of which I could say, let's please connect the dots between the migration of black Americans, remember the Great Migration, when black people left the South and went to the North, and the migration of new immigrants to this country, which also includes black immigrants who are far too often neglected and ignored when we talk about immigration in this country. What was illegal, what is legal, and why? And I can't really talk to you about legality and not talk about weed. Apparently I'm really high-strung and always stressed out. So my friend, for my 36th birthday this February, said, "Jose, we gotta get you high." I've never tried weed because I always thought it was illegal. And I figured my illegality was enough. I can't do other illegal things. And my friend was like, no, it'll calm you down. And I said, no, I can't. I really can't. I can't. Maybe I want to get my papers. Maybe. I don't know. I can't. And then when I told my friend that I was coming to Oregon, she was like, "You can totally do weed in Oregon. Try a brownie or something, right?" And I was kind of researching this a little bit, and then I found this graphic, which I thought was so interesting and provocative. Now, mind you, I respect your right to legally get high. I respect that. Kudos to you if you need it, right? Mine is a Starbucks iced coffee. Yours is weed. Great. Your freedom, my freedom, right? But while we allow you to do that, can we at least think about the legality of human beings? I find it really, really interesting that in the same year, 2014, that weed became legal here was also the same year that driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants did not become a reality, right? In this state right now, we have 8 states, plus DC, where weed is legal. In this country right now, there's 12 states, including Washington State above you, California below you, that allow people like me to drive. One of those states that don't allow us to drive is the state of Texas. 1.8 million undocumented people in the state of Texas, and they cannot legally drive. I'm sorry, is there a subway system in Texas that I don't know about? So how are those people going to work? Is that how they get pulled over, and before you know it, they're detained, and before you know it, they're deported? And as I'm thinking about that, is there anything more American than driving? To move from here to there? I mean, I tried to walk from my hotel to Whole Foods. It was like 3 miles. It was pretty good. But the drive was a lot quicker because I kind of was busy. I was doing other things. Now, my question is, can the people legalizing weed work with the people trying to legalize driving? Can they do a creative alliance of sort? Can they, and the question now here is, what are you all gonna do? I don't know if you know this, but 1 in 8 workers in the state of Oregon is an immigrant. 1 out of 8. Together making up an essential share of your workforce. 26% of the entire agricultural, forestry, fishing, and hunting industry is immigrant. 20% of all manufacturing is immigrant. Almost 20% of all accommodation and food services. 16% of management of companies and enterprises. How are they getting around? Exactly. When I didn't have a license, I was covering the 2008 presidential campaign in the state of Texas. It was primary night. I was speeding. I'm so sorry I was speeding, but I was late. There was a caucus. I had to go. I was late on deadline. I get pulled over. The very first time I ever got pulled over by a cop, which at that point was a sheriff in Texas. He kind of looked like an older version of Matthew McConaughey, which was interesting. So he pulled me over, And I was like, shit. And my Oregon license. I'm thinking, so he asked for the license and the registration. It was a rental car. I gave it to him. And as he walked from my car to his car, the sheriff car, all I could think of was he's going to find out that the address that I use in that ID doesn't exist. So what is he going to know? If he finds out that the license was actually procured illegally, right, what can he do? Is he going to call Lynn Duke, my editor at the Washington Post, who's waiting on the story that's late? Is he going to call Don Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post? Are they going to find out that a Washington Post political reporter covering the Democratic primary is an illegal alien driving around Texas? I was so stressed out, I peed my pants. They were diesel jeans. It was expensive. I peed my pants. I peed. And all I could think of was, please let him not smell the pee in the pants. We're talking. Hey, who are you with? I'm with the Washington Post. And then he goes, oh, I love All the President's Men. What is he talking about? Oh, the movie. I've never seen it. Oh, really? Oh, and then somebody calls him and says apparently there was an emergency, there was a fire, he needed to go. Young man, can you please drive slower? The Washington Post is a great institution. So I drove maybe like a mile, drove 25 miles an hour in a freeway that was like 70 miles an hour. I stopped when there was no one else on the road, and I played the eternal Stevie Wonder, Don't You Worry About a Thing. I'm relaying this to you. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of not, because, being on your pee is not fun. Because I wonder what happens with all those workers in the state of Oregon, driving up and down the state, trying to provide you with your living. Trying to make sure that they can provide for their families and not miss work and be able to go to church and be able to go to the grocery store and be able to live their lives. It may just be a license to you. It may just be even a question of legal or illegal to you. But for us, it's peace. So this question of what does it mean to be an ally? It's a big question. What does that mean? This is a question that we've been asking at Define American, and we created this video that I'm about to show you that actually made its debut at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. My dearest friends actually organized the Women's March in Washington, D.C. I was just lucky to be friends with them. And they asked me to speak in November when they were planning it. He said, hey, we want you to talk about immigration. And the first thing I told my friend Paolo Mendoza, the artistic director, was like, I'm a man. It's called the Women's March. Why am I going to speak? I'm saying this to you because apparently it was the only time that someone declined a speaking invitation at the Women's March in D.C. But I declined it because that's what it means to be an ally. It means that you have to create space for people who need it. It means knowing how to step back and when to step back. It means knowing when to be silent. It means knowing to know exactly what it is that you need to say and do at the precisely the time. So in honor of allyship, this is our video.
Dear Undocumented America.
Dear Undocumented
Dear
America.
Undocumented America.
We stand with you.
We are with you.
You have allies.
You have allies.
You have allies. You have allies.
And it's time for those allies to come out.
And it's time for those allies to come out.
I'm an ally to my undocumented cousins.
I'm an ally to my undocumented partner.
I'm an ally to my undocumented parents.
To my undocumented parishioner.
To my undocumented students.
I'm an ally to my undocumented neighbor.
To my undocumented coworker.
To my undocumented friend. I am an ally, even though I don't know any undocumented people.
Actually, considering that there are 11.4 million undocumented immigrants.
Even if you don't think you know any, you probably do.
I'm an ally to all immigrants.
I'm an ally to all
immigrants. I'm an ally to all immigrants.
And showing that you're an ally can mean a lot of different things.
It could mean protesting.
And organizing.
Or speaking up in uncomfortable conversations.
It means using the correct words.
And listening to what other people have to say.
Whatever happens in the next 4 years,
it's time for us to stand together against ignorance, fear, and hate.
Dear Undocumented
Dear
America.
Undocumented America.
Dear Undocumented,
Dear Undocumented America.
We are with you.
We see you.
We stand with you.
Can you put the lights up? Do you mind putting the lights up? Sorry, whoever's controlling that. Maybe it's ice. Just kidding. You have to have a sense of humor. I mean, you really do. If someone could put the lights up, that would be amazing. As I end this talk, and I look forward to your questions, I just want to talk about one thing, which is DACA. I'm sure people here are familiar with it. We actually have a fact sheet at Define American, right there, Define American/DACA, that you can go. It's like a one-pager. It's a perfect thing that you can share with your relatives on Thanksgiving weekend to get uncomfortable conversations started, right? I love uncomfortable conversations. I actually think we are where we are because the conversations haven't gotten uncomfortable enough. So this is the statistics about everything you need to know about DACA, right? We emailed this fact sheet to about 3,000 reporters and journalists across the country. I'm sharing one part of it with you just so you get the sense of who these DACA recipients are, right? I thought it was really interesting that 54% bought their first car. If it was up to me, I would do a campaign with the Ford Motor Company. It's like, we make you a citizen, buy a Ford. Might be interesting, right? I thought it was interesting that 12% bought their first home. I've been a Bank of America member since I was 17. I don't know if Bank of America knows how many undocumented people bank at Bank of America, but I banked with them for so long that I started recently getting an email from them saying ready to buy a home. I freaked out one day that I actually stopped the car on the freeway and called the line and said, can you please stop sending me this email? Because I don't know, am I home? Do you want me to be home? Like, what does home really mean? I can afford to buy a home, right? But is this really my home? Are the conditions enough that I can feel at home? I just think these statistics are incredible. And right here is an email address. So there apparently are, according to the government, 12,049 Oregonians who have DACA. I'm assuming some of which are at this very, very university. I've only been here for a little over a week, and already I can tell you that there's a lot of fear in this community about being out, about having DACA. Some people on Twitter who follow me, an undocumented student, so far 10 people, who said that they don't know anyone else who's here with DACA, and they don't want to know. It's better that way, said one man. Right? There are two people here that I really want to lift up. Dr. Mariko Lin. Can you stand up, Mariko Lin? There she is, all the way up there. And Rosa Chavez. Actually, Mariko and Rosa. So these two women are doing everything they can at this university to support students with DACA. If you have DACA, but you don't want to be out about it, you can totally email them at uodreamers@uoregon.edu, and you can talk to them confidentially, right? And please get whatever help you need to get. Understand scholarships, understand the fact that some of the DACAs are about to expire pretty soon. What does that mean? This is now a time to be creative and innovative. What can that look like? Please reach out to them. This is now a time for mentors, right? And this is the time to create these spaces. I have to say, though, that I've only been here for a little over a week. I've already met a few DACA recipients who are out. And some of them told me that they were going to come here tonight. Now, as someone who's come out of 2 closets in my life, I'm not coming out of any more closets. I don't force anybody to come out who's not ready to come out. I don't do that. You do it when you're ready, right? Now, having said that, if you're an undocumented student in this campus who has DACA, or even if you don't have DACA, and you feel comfortable standing up, can you stand up? Okay. Okay, don't sit down yet. No, don't sit down. It's okay, don't sit down. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King is when he says that history will record that the greatest tragedy in this period of social transition is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. Please look around. All of us who are standing up cannot afford for you to be silent or indifferent. And the question now is, since we first talked about privilege, the question about privilege is, what are you going to do to risk it? What are you doing? What have you done to risk your privilege? Now is the time. Thank you for being here. Thanks. Oh, sit. It's okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, you don't have to stand up. Sit. Okay, we have 2 mics. Ask me some uncomfortable questions that I may hopefully answer. Awesome. And can you say your name?
My name is Elizabeth. I would like to ask you, what do you suggest we should do with an immigration policy?
Okay.
Considering
Yeah.
that we have one size of the cake, meaning budget,
One
funds. We have certain funds, so I
Yeah.
know that we can afford doing what we have done so far. Whomever who's here has been here for a while, but in a sustainable way.
So I'm of the mind, and you may disagree with me here, so please stay on the mic. You may disagree with me. So, I don't know how many more billions of dollars are we going to spend trying to secure a border that will never be fully secure. And yet every single piece of legislation coming out of the Democrats or Republicans is always about border security. We have spent $100 billion since 9/11 protecting ourselves from Mexico.
I'm Mexican.
Protecting you from what? Chipotle? What are we protecting you from? Right? I don't know. So I'm of the belief that immigration reform is dead. But you know what's not dead? I think immigrant rights is going to go in the same direction as LGBT rights. It's going to go state by state by state. And I actually think it may be smarter at this point where you have President Trump happening, if it stays there for now. For us to pass immigration reform, we're going to have to be really honest with ourselves about, again, addicted to cheap labor, right? We put a sign outside of the border saying, keep out. 10 yards in, what do we say? Help wanted. You can't have it both ways. And I feel like this is not a time to have these hard policy conversations when the president and the political atmosphere in DC won't allow it. So actually in my slide, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. The last question is not how you define American, is how do you define an Oregonian? Like, how are you all going to protect each other, right? And that's why every policy at every high school and university should be about what kind of support do we give undocumented students? How can we get people driver's licenses so they have a piece of ID, right? What are churches doing, right? And I have to tell you, I'm making this promise to you, when you're ready to have that statewide fight again about driver's license, I would come here on my own dime to fight with you.
Thank you.
I have not gone to the eastern part of the state near Idaho, so hey, we can go together, right? But I would think that prioritizing all the local things we can do for the state and for towns and cities not to cooperate with ICE, right? For churches to try to figure out what sanctuary means for them. Right now, there's about 15 people in sanctuary in various faith organizations across this country. When you go to Define American, actually, we have a site specifically for churches who want to be sanctuary for undocumented people. DefineAmerican.com/sanctuary. So for now, I think local. That's what I would focus on. Yeah.
I
Thanks.
agree.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a microphone up there too. I forgot that you were up there. I'm sorry. Hi. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for coming. And I
Thank
just
you.
want to, just sidebar. I was raised by a very open-minded mother, so these are dialogues we had around the table, and we're all from here, And I just want to say I have a little boy, and I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but he's a little white boy who's here, and he has a social security card, and it's just magic, you know? And it isn't lost on me that that's really powerful. So are there, and he's only 3, but I think about, as I believe in being a pioneer, and I will stick my foot in it. I'm not opposed. I'm like, y'all don't have to like what I have to say. I'm speaking from my heart, damn it. What are good resources that you would recommend for children, like good dialogues or books? I mean, I try to find good books about lots of cultures.
I'm so happy you asked that question. We're actually right now in the process of working with the Southern Poverty Law Center of creating tools for moms and teachers to start talking about migration as early as kindergarten.
Nice.
Right?
And what was that called again?
So this is going to happen, I think, in the next 3 months, like an education initiative that we're doing with the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we can create a list of actual curriculum that teachers can use in the classroom about how to talk about migration in humane ways, right? Because right now it doesn't really exist. So everything we're doing so far, thankfully, has had like a college component or a high school component, but not middle school and not elementary school. I just shared with Ellen, you know, I am nowhere without my schools, public schools. That's why taxes, I'm fine with paying them, you know. I just found out last week that the school district that I attended as a middle schooler wants to call a new school the Jose Antonio Vargas Elementary School. Okay, that's what I call undocumented and privileged. Like, that's really privilege, right? But you know, all I could think about was, man, you gotta love America, right? They won't give me a green card. I might get deported in the airport, but they want to name a school after me? When the superintendent called, I said, I'm not dead yet. So like, is it a joke? I'm not dead yet. Can I get a green card? But I'm joking, sort of. But my point is, education at the earliest level is absolutely essential. And having parents like you who are willing to start those conversations that early is incredibly important. Even the question of, where did white people come from? Like, white is not a country, right? Is it German? Is it Italian? Is it Irish? What is it?
This is what I say to him. I'm like,
right.
You need to understand that you're going to have to advocate for your friends.
Exactly.
Like, and he goes, okay, Mama, advocate for your friends. Like,
but thank you for doing that. So please look out. In the next 3 months, it's going to happen.
And so sorry, I just want to make sure I wrote that down. Southern
Poverty Law Center.
I'm going to be
yeah.
Googling that.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, what's up, man? We met earlier. What's up?
It's a little low. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna try this.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to like put it up to my.
You want my mic?
All right.
Oh, you got it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's up?
I just wanted to, first of all, I'm gonna say a little bit of like a little paragraph of a story, just to let you know where I come from.
Yeah, please.
And then I'm gonna ask you a question of like where my interests are and what I want to do with the community. So I'm a DACA recipient, and I'm Juan. When Measure 88 failed here in Oregon.
The driver's license measure.
The driver's license. It failed in my county. 30%, only 30% voted in favor of it. And then after that day, I was never part of the movement. Never cared. I was like, sure, I'm undocumented. I'll go do my thing. After that, I was like, F this. I'm gonna get involved. I want to know what I can do. So I was looking over the internet, be like, most well-known undocumented immigrants, and look who showed up.
Oh, hi.
So it drove me. I'm like, okay, this person is being this open. This person is doing this. This person is just being a boss. He's risking his life for the betterment of the cause. I'm like, I want to be like him. So now, ever since then, that was just a couple years ago, I was able to graduate from Western Oregon University. I was able to. I was able to start a Dreamer support group in Monmouth. I was able to do a bunch of immigration stuff. I was able to even get high honors in my efforts in the movements. But now my efforts are, I'm a graduate student at Oregon State University now, and my goals is to change the system within higher education. I want to make sure that Dreamers can go to school safely, securely, and with the proper funding and legal resources. How do you, so just putting it out there that you have been my role model. You're the person that I looked up to when I was just getting started in the movement.
Oh, thank you.
And then, I'm sorry, I get emotional when
No, it's okay.
do that. I'm going up to
Yeah,
face
it's
to my.
awkward to me too. But okay.
Trust me, I know how it feels.
Yeah.
Kind of like other people looking up at you, and I feel.
And you know what I tell them? I tell them I'm incredibly imperfect and flawed. That I don't know what I'm doing half the time, although half the time I try to know what I'm doing, and that I have to be enough for myself.
Good.
To your question, go ahead.
And now to my question is like, what advice do you give dreamers that are looking to start movements inside their own universities when there's like no like knowledge of dreamers actually going, but you know they're there. Like there's statistics saying like at OSU that there's 900 DACA recipients. I'm like, where are they at? Where my homies at?
But I'm so glad you asked this question. So right now, probably the part about Define American that I'm excited about the most is so we have a college chapter program.
Which you're coming to OSU, I'm aware.
Yeah, so there are 48 Define American college chapters in 22 states across this country. The busiest in Lincoln, Nebraska. Last month, we convened all of the leaders of the chapter to meet in Lincoln, Nebraska to come up with national principles, which is amazing. And what I love about the chapters is most of the members are actually US citizens working with their undocumented classmates to try to change the culture in their campus around the issue. So I would love for you to start one. There's a student here, Rachel Alm is her name. She's actually a fellow at the Morse Center who's gonna start one here, which is awesome. So, but what I love about this is it's mirroring kind of the Gay Straight Alliance movement when I was growing up, which is that most members are US citizens who are becoming allies for their undocumented classmates. So please start one at your school. And for all since you brought this up, this is not really your question, but I'm just gonna say this.
Go for it.
This is really tough, you know. I have had in the past 3 weeks now, maybe 9 conversations with DACA recipients who are pondering leaving. 3 of the 9 have decided to leave and said, it's just too hard. And one of them called and started apologizing because she was like, I feel so guilty because like, you're staying, clearly, how can I leave? And you know, all I can tell her was like, you have to live your life. America is something that you can bring with you, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to do, now I am so excited and really happy about the fact that the movement is growing, that there are leaders like you, but there is no movement if you're not well. And you have to take care of yourself, first and foremost. Right?
Thank you.
That is the first responsibility.
Thank you so much, sir. And
what was that?
One last thing.
Yeah.
You're coming to OSU, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm coming there, yes.
I just got news today that I'm actually going to be traveling to DC to lobby for the Clean Dream Act that week, so I won't actually get to see you start the Define chapter. But I hope you welcome my OSU students.
I will, man.
Well,
and be careful with the TSA line. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, is there anyone up there who has a question? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You've been waiting too, huh? Okay. Please, go ahead.
Hi. So you showed the image of Ellen and said that like really started a spiral effect kind of for LGBT rights. Do you think in 2017 it's possible for something like that to happen with kind of the leadership we have? And if not, when do you think the people in power and America in general will be ready?
What a great question. Are you a media major or something? What are you studying?
Advertising.
Oh. So I'm saying that because I got arrested in Texas 3 summers ago. And after that, one of the first people to reach out was John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who's amazing. Amazing. I had no idea that he actually knew who I was and he was following my work. So we had lunch and he said something really interesting. He said, Jose, there was a time when you write a big story for the New York Times Sunday magazine, you get on the cover of Time magazine, you make a documentary for CNN, and you're done. You've changed culture, right? But guess what? You're not even halfway there, right? You know why? Because he said when Selma happened, right? When Bloody Sunday happened, there were 3 television stations, and everybody listened to the radio and read the newspaper. So whatever you may have thought of colored people, right, as they would call black people back then, You had the exact same information and there was a collective narrative. No collective narrative exists today. And I'm sad to report that I'm not going to name the news institutions, but you know what they are in this state. I am just reading through the websites that inform Oregon residents about this issue, and I was just flabbergasted. Not only a lack of information, right? The sheer flood of misinformation, right? So I think the way to move the needle now is not just a one cover story on Time Magazine. It's not just getting on the cover of Time Magazine or making a documentary for CNN. It's literally having a much more layered approach to a media strategy, right? That's why for us, for example, right now, we're training 20 undocumented people to go on conservative talk radio early next year. We're training 20 DACA recipients to go on talk radio. You know how hard that is to do? We're training people to be able to go on conservative television shows, not just Fox News, right? We're trying to figure out how, right now in this country, immigration policy is run by Breitbart, right, in this country. So how do we go against that? What does that look like? So for us, it's not just having a strategy for the news media. It has to be a strategy about how do you get an undocumented character on Grey's Anatomy, right? Like, how do I get an undocumented sitcom where the teacher, because I love teachers, where the teachers are the heroes, are the ones trying to figure out how to help the students. So we're working on those. So for me, it's a much more multi-layered approach. But I love that of all the people, John Lewis was the one who brought it up. And you know what he said too? He said that the SNCC activists could not have survived Twitter. Kind of the call-out culture that we have now, where everybody calls each other out publicly instead of writing letters privately. He said the movement would not have survived that in the 60s and 50s. I thought that was really interesting.
Thank you. And also, real quick, along with that, how do you think that people like me, who have a Social Security card and are very privileged white people, how can we help the people that we know that are undocumented or people we don't know without it becoming like about us?
Great question. I think a lot of it is making sure that you're not approaching it from a place of patronizing or condescending, right? And so a lot of it, I think, is doing your homework. A lot of it is also asking people what kind of help they need, right? And a lot of it is creating a space where people can actually speak up, right? I was amazed, we had a meeting a few days ago with the DACA students here, and only 5 people showed up at the meeting. And the first thing I said was, there's gotta be more than 5 DACA recipients in the University of Oregon. And you know what one of the guys said? It's Oregon. People don't feel safe to be out about it. So how do you create that culture? The fact you asking that question right now helps create that culture. I have to say too, given how predominantly white this university is, I think even an exercise asking a lot of white students where they come from would be fascinating, right? As far as I'm concerned, there are 3 fundamental questions every American must answer. Where did you come from? How did you get here? Who paid? Unless you're Native American or an African American brought here because of slavery so you can build this country for free, you have to answer those 3 questions. How provocative is that, asking white students where they're from? I think that'd be really provocative and really necessary. So something like that. Thank you. Yes, what's up? We have 10 more minutes. Okay.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate the comments. Sometimes you would joke about things like ICE officers being here, but it more or less, in my opinion, just reinstates to folks who don't normally have to worry about this, a state of hyper awareness. You brought up a bunch of things that makes some folks not feel safe all the time, and I would say in bringing this reality, you brought to light a world that it's seen by again many underrepresented folks, a state of always having to be worried, always having to be just also thinking about the future in much less optimistic terms. And I want to ask you, what do you think is the role of this university in shaping a space that, although might be recognized right now as a sanctuary space? What is the steps? What are the steps that are missing from those good ones that we have given? But
let's talk about comedy, by the way. I find if I can't laugh about this, I don't know what I would do. We're organizing right now an undocumented comedy night.
Nice.
Of undocumented comedians. I mean, look, Richard Pryor, like all that stuff were incredibly necessary and subversive, right? So we're doing that. Just wanted to say that. I was actually heartened when I read, I'm butchering his last name, Schill? Ooh, yay, I pronounced it right. Great. He published a letter right after DACA was announced. He emailed it, I guess, to the students and the faculty, everybody here, about what they would do to protect DACA students. I've been meeting with some DACA students, and I have a list of other things that the president could do, and I would be more than happy to give it to him before I leave. So there's that. I have to say, though, like, given how relatively expensive it is to go to this school, I looked it up. Figuring out how every department, every school can figure out making sure what the scholarships are and what the requirements are for the scholarships. Like, you know, when people say, oh, US citizens only, like, what does that really mean, right? Meaning for me, like, how do we make sure that we're providing every department, from the business school to the law school to the education school, like, how do you provide students who actually want to excel? I think that's a big one. And again, the culture of openness in talking about this. If there's one thing that I hope would come out of my being here with the Wayne Morse Center, I would hope that more openness about this in general. But as a reporter, I haven't done enough reporting yet, so I am more than happy to give to the president and his administration my findings after spending an entire month here. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yes. Oh, I'm gonna get you first. Hi, I can't see you at all. What's up?
Hello. Well, first of all, I love that you brought up Ellen.
Oh.
I just watched the puppy episode again on Hulu last week. That was perfect. Okay, anyway, yeah. I go to a church that has a very large Hispanic population. And it's a great, like...
what denomination?
Catholic.
Catholic, okay.
And it's a great multicultural church, and I just love that. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's a pretty big leader among the Hispanic population there. And one day he said to me something that really shook me. He said, if they come and start grabbing people who are undocumented, quite a few more people are going to be taken away than you think. And that really just shook me, you know, because I see these people as my brothers and sisters. And you briefly mentioned about churches doing sanctuary.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I was wondering if you can please give us some more information about that.
So if you go to defineamerican.com/sanctuary, there's a woman right outside of Harvard Square who was taking sanctuary in a Lutheran church. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to talk to the faith leaders in Cambridge who made a decision. How did they decide to do that? What permission did they need from their congregation? Just the process of it. So we filmed the conversation, right, about how a church decides, or a synagogue, decides to go through this, and it's on the website. So it's basically providing resources and media guides to how to do that. So that's one thing to do. I have to tell you, though, I haven't done enough reporting on this, so this is anecdotal. I have been surprised that 4 undocumented people have told me, one in Colorado, one in Massachusetts, one in North Carolina, and one in Arizona, that the Catholic Church has been unwilling to serve as sanctuary. Even though the Catholic Church wouldn't grow or be sustainable without Latinos and Latinas going to church every Sunday, right? Thought that was really interesting. But again, everything is local, so I'm sure your church might be more than willing to do this. And the last thing I want to say about this is, look, I was raised a Catholic. I'm Filipino, so it's like a birthright kind of thing. But I was really torn because, you know, when I was growing up, my grandmother would tell me that I would go to hell because of the gay thing, and, you know. And I keep thinking a lot about, if I can't be a citizen of a country because the laws don't allow it, what does it mean to be a citizen in the Church of God? Like, what does that look like? I think the role of faith communities in this is incredibly, incredibly important.
I agree.
And it can't just be what they say to the press and what looks good on TV. It has to be, what are they saying in their sermons? You know, I'm really proud. I think so far we've had 10 faith leaders, including rabbis, give Define American sermons. So we're actually providing, if you go to the website, you'll see some of the resources there too.
Okay.
But thank you for starting that really necessary but can be uncomfortable conversation. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I have okay, that's it. All four of you. That's it. You go first.
Sweet. So,
There's three
my
more
name's Hugo Nicolas, and
What's up?
I just wanted to say it's an honor to have you right in front of me because I remember reading your article in 2011 when you were talking about your story, and that's when I also decided to come out as an undocumented person who right now have the privilege to have deferred action. And because of your courage, you know, I was able to fight for tuition equity in the state of Oregon. I was able to, you know, be involved in the movement for a driver's license, and I was able to attend University of Oregon. I'm still haven't graduated, but that's my plan. And I just want to say that it's an honor to have you right in front of me because your story changed what, you know, the dreamers and everyone started coming out. I remember those back in 2011. And so now that you're here in Oregon, I want it to be a story of the kind of like what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you. What's up?
So my name's Henry, and I too want to thank you for coming out here. And this is something pretty cool because just last year I was hearing about you in a class. We were studying you. We were looking at your documentary. We were looking at your documentary, Define American, and from that I had this huge impact on me because of the amount of people that you got to meet, the different stories that documentary portrayed, and because of that, my question these past couple of months, I've met people that have talked about the detention centers, and the people there that have been caught up with ICE. And I think something that's happening is that a lot of people think that the moment you get detained is the day after you're deported, and what I've heard from is that that's not necessarily the case anymore. The sheer amount of people being detained is causing the detainment centers to slow down with the process. People that shouldn't be there, and even in the first place, are there for months, weeks, waiting, and the only thing they know is that they're going to be deported, but they don't know when. And so I guess my question to you is, how do we advocate for those people?
We just started kind of this, well, I can't say it yet. We're doing this really interesting artist campaign around this so we can tell the American public more about what it is to be inside the detention center. So as I briefly said that I was detained, it was only 8 hours, like 3 summers ago, but they're not detention centers, they're jails, right? When I was detained, it was the exact same time as the kids were walking from Central America. So they put me in the same, they divided us by gender, so I was with the boys. So I just want you to imagine like 5-year-old to 13-year-old young boys sitting in a, you know, cement floor eating apples. They fed us apples and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And it wasn't even a blanket, it was like this warm cellophane thing. People don't know what's happening inside these centers. And what's sad is what's tragic is we have a completely rogue ICE and DHS system that are not accountable to anybody or anything, right? And I don't know if you know that, but I don't know if you all know this, but we taxpayers are the ones paying for these detention centers. Did you know that there's 32,000, it's a congressional mandate that every day 32,000 beds must be filled in detention centers? It's a congressional mandate, right? So we don't know what's happening. And, you know, I actually think, you know, as someone who covered Barack Obama in 2008, the expansion of the detention system during the Obama years is something that I don't think the president will ever able to fully explain or justify. But we're still so early to it. So right now for us, the artist intervention is where we're going because thankfully the ACLU, God bless the ACLU, and a lot of other legal services are providing all those. You know, the ACLU just won the case of JD, that young woman who's in detention right now, who was barred from having an abortion. I would just hope that at a time like this, we connect the dots and realize that immigrant rights is a women's rights issue. It's an LGBT rights issue. It's a Black Lives Matter issue. It's an economic inequality issue. Like, all of these issues intersect. It's not just one thing. So that's what we're working on. And, you know, there's detention centers in Oregon. What was that? Okay. I haven't visited yet. My lawyers tell me not to get anywhere near the detention centers. But yeah. But thank you for asking that. Thank you. Yeah. What's up?
Hey, man.
You wrote it down?
I wrote it down, yeah.
Okay, cool.
First of all, from
You're
a
Filipino?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I like to claim people.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
From an undocumented queer Catholic, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I thought it was interesting that you opened up with the arrest that happened last week in Portland, Oregon, when you were briefly mentioning that a man was arrested inside a private home in Oregon.
In Portland.
In Portland. He's my cousin.
Oh.
And yeah,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, a lot of his rights were violated. A lot of laws were broken.
A lot of laws.
A lot of laws.
And both senators have now called for an investigation about what happened.
I called them the next morning.
You called them the next morning?
I called them the next morning. I requested, and I'm going to call them again to request a Senate
I'm going to need to get
hearing.
your number. Okay.
So, you know, you're right. We do need to include our Black peers in this conversation.
Yes.
We need to include our Native peers in this conversation, our Indigenous peers. Yes, Operation Condor destabilized Latin America and sparked a drug war, which subsequently sparked a wave of immigrants into the U.S.
Yep.
And that's something a lot of us don't know. NAFTA. Oh, NAFTA screwed us over. I'm a Mexican national, and it is because of NAFTA that we immigrated here.
Yep.
And our history goes back beyond that. My grandfather was a bracero in the 1940s. So a lot of my history goes back even beyond most other people coming here to the U.S. One other thing I want to say is that Oregon's yes on 88, Measure 88, wasn't because we weren't working together. It was because there was out-of-state interest.
Yes.
Public interest that funneled in through our political system here in the state and ultimately made us fail. But there is that question. We do have to work together. We do have to change the narrative. We are attempting to do that up in the Portland metro area, which is where I'm from. I'm a Portland Community College student. And we are working. We're working very hard. At this point, it's a question of access and people like you who access. A question of access to people like you and other leaders in the community. We do need to work together, but the narrative has to change through the work that you're doing through Define American, but it also has to change at a local level where we're all coming together, working collaboratively, and having access to people like you. So this was not a question.
I'm going to be in Portland like 4 or 5 times. I'm Jose at defineamerican.com.
Perfect.
Jose at defineamerican.com.
Perfect.
Please
I'll
email
remember
me.
that. Yeah.
Great.
So this is just me calling you out and saying, come work with us. So there's a lot of work to do, and I would be glad to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last question.
So I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So I was baptized Mormon, and one thing I noticed is that in my church, there's a small group of brown people. Some of us are documented, some of us are not.
Yeah.
So I want some tips and like some advice on how I can like open up and like get that church to like open up and help those people out, because it's really sad and embarrassing seeing people with the same color skin as me, and even some of my own kind, discriminating against the ones that are not.
Isn't it the most painful?
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually we did it last Thanksgiving, we're doing it again, the Gift of Uncomfortable Conversation package. So like short videos and one-pagers that you can send with coworkers. It's been interesting because I've had some people email us saying, now I can't talk to the woman who sits next to me at work because of this thing that I gave her.
Right.
But still, I'm glad that So I would start with that. If you go to our website, you'll see the resources and you'll see some of it there. But what I want to address, though, is the willingness to do that, right? Because it's much easier for you to just try to ignore them. And again, I don't think we can do that anymore, right? I don't think we can afford to do that. I want to address kind of the other point that you made, which is, I have to tell you, the hardest part for me, I can deal, I've had some people actually call TSA on me when they see me at the airport. They're like, hey, it's illegal. Why is he flying? And of course, I fly so much, I'm like a diamond member in every airline, right? And so they're like, he has a first class seat, so like, I don't know what the problem is, right? Because I get upgraded all the time. Some people actually do that. But I can handle that. I can handle Tucker Carlson, who cares, right? The hardest thing has been with people in the movement. Because, like, I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker, that's who I am. Like, this whole activist leader thing, I have no training for this whatsoever, right? And that's not really who I am. And it's been painful sometimes, all the expectations that people have about, people assuming that I perpetuate the model minority stereotype, maybe because I'm Asian or something. People who say that, I remember one guy said to me once, "Oh, you can't represent us, you're too successful." And all I could think of was all those colleagues at the Washington Post who always wondered why I was in the room, who questioned why I was there. And now to be a part of this movement and be questioned about my own motivations. But look, we all have our things to carry, so I carry that. But I'm saying this because it's really important for me to be fine with what I do. Independence is incredibly important to me. It's the most expensive thing I own, right? After the election, my lawyer said that I could no longer have a permanent address in case ICE decides to issue a warrant of arrest. So I packed everything up in my apartment, put everything in storage, and I'm living up 2 suitcases and a car, right? And hotels room all across America. That is what I'm willing to do, right? And that's all that I can do. So all of us who fight for this, I guess what I want to say is, let's please be kind to each other. Let's please try to understand that all of us are doing what we can. And when we are not, let's push each other gently. Because, it's hard enough out there, It's hard enough out there to be able to fight the very people who are fighting for the exact same thing as you are. The last thing I want to say, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, who created a language for me to be able to claim myself and to not surrender to the master narrative, as Toni Morrison calls it. And Baldwin, who I just, love, Baldwin, who should be required reading in schools across this country. One of my favorite quotes from him was, "Our history is each other. That is the only guide. Our history is each other." Thank you again so much for coming here.